Lieutenant Du Hyun stepped off the transport ship and felt the lower gravity of Nexus 7 right away. The purple sky above him was filled with flashes of distant explosions, but he didn't pay them much attention. After 3 years of working with the Galactic Coalition, such sights had become normal to him. 2 alien guards waited for him at the landing pad. Their blue, scaled skin marked them as Varians, and their twitching ear fins showed their nervousness. Du Hyun noticed how they kept looking at the sky, flinching at each far-off boom. "Welcome to Forward Base 7, Lieutenant," the taller Varian said, his translator making the words sound flat and mechanical. "Please follow us quickly. It's not safe to stay in the open." Du Hyun smiled and walked at a casual pace, carrying his simple duffel bag over one shoulder. The guards hurried him through 3 security checkpoints, each staffed by a different alien species. At each stop, the aliens stared at him with their various eyes, tentacles, or sensors. He knew what they were thinking. He had seen that look many times before. To them, he was a Deathworlder, a creature from a planet so dangerous that most galactic species couldn't even visit it. Earth, with its high gravity, extreme weather, and countless natural disasters, had shaped humans into something that scared most aliens. The final door opened into the base's command center. The room was built like a bunker, with thick walls and many screens showing the battlefield outside. First Speaker Rill stood in the center, his crystalline body glowing with soft blue light. The Aetherian commander turned all 4 of his eye stalks toward Du Hyun. "So, they'd really sent me a human," Rill said. His crystal body chimed softly, a sign of worry in his species. "I requested tactical support, and they sent me a creature from a death world." "Yes, sir," Du Hyun replied simply. He had learned that being calm often worked better than trying to defend himself. "I have 3 years of experience helping coalition forces deal with swarm attacks." "Experience?" Rill's crystal body flashed orange. "The reports say you sleep through battles. They say you eat while bases are being bombed. How can we trust our defense to someone who doesn't take war seriously?" Du Hyun set his bag down and pulled out a worn paper notebook, something that made all the aliens in the room stare. Using physical paper was rare in the galaxy. "Sir, I take my job very seriously," he said, opening the notebook. "But humans learned long ago that panic doesn't help win wars. Would you like to see my ideas for improving the base's defenses?" Before Rill could answer, alarms started blaring. The screen showed incoming swarm ships, at least 30 of them. The command center burst into action. Aliens rushed to battle stations, some of them shaking so hard they could barely work their controls. "Lieutenant, get to the shelter," Rill ordered, his crystal body now pulsing red with fear. "The swarm's terror weapons will begin soon." Du Hyun looked at the screens, then at his notebook. "Sir, if it's okay with you, I'd like to stay and observe the base's current defense patterns. It will help me make better suggestions." The room fell silent. Even the alarms seemed quieter as every alien turned to stare at him. A human, wanting to stay in the command center during a swarm attack. It was unheard of. "You want to stay?" Rill's translator barely managed to handle his shocked tone. "The swarm's weapons don't affect you." Du Hyun shrugged. "They're not pleasant, but they're not that bad. Like thunder during a storm back home." He pulled a pencil from his pocket. "May I stay, sir?" Rill's crystal body cycled through several colors before settling on a confused purple. Yes. Yes, you may stay, Lieutenant. Show me what a Deathworlder can do." The first waves of sonic attacks hit the base. The aliens flinched and huddled closer to their stations. But Du Hyun just sat down, opened his notebook, and began taking notes. His calm presence seemed to help the others focus, even as the swarm's terror weapons tried to break their minds. Perhaps, Rill thought as he watched the human work, there was something to be learned from these Deathworlders after all. The base's warning sirens started just as Du Hyun finished setting up his hammock in the empty barracks. Most soldiers had rushed to the underground bunkers at the first sign of the incoming swarm attack, but he had other plans. The hammock, made of strong earth cotton, swayed gently in the artificial gravity. "Human, what are you doing?" A voice called from the doorway. It was Tech, a mantis-like alien from the engineering team. His forearms were shaking, and his antennae twitched wildly. "The bunkers are the other way. The swarm is coming with their biggest attack yet." Do-hyun looked up from where he was testing the hammock's strength. "I know, but I sleep better up here. The bunkers are too stuffy." Tech's compound eyes grew wider, if that was even possible. "Sleep, sleep. The terror weapons will start in minutes. No one can sleep through that. Want to bet?" Do-hyun smiled, pulling out a small pillow from his bag. "I'll give you my chocolate ration for tomorrow if I'm not asleep in 10 minutes. Before Tech could answer, the first wave hit. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the swarm's psychological weapons. The sound wasn't just noise. It was designed to trigger fear responses in most alien species. Tech fell to his knees, his chitinous armor rattling. "Please, human. The bunker." Tech begged. Do-hyun just yawned and climbed into his hammock. "You should go, Tech, but I'm fine here. This is actually quieter than my old apartment in Seoul. The neighbor's dog used to bark all night." The mantis alien stared in disbelief as Do-hyun pulled out a worn paper book, another Earth oddity that fascinated the aliens. The human started reading casually, as if he was on a peaceful vacation instead of in the middle of a war zone. Word spread quickly through the base's communication channels. Soon, the security cameras in the barracks had more viewers than any entertainment stream. Aliens huddled in their bunkers, watching in amazement as the human turned a page in his book, yawned again, and actually started to drift off to sleep. First Speaker Rill couldn't believe what he was seeing. He watched from the command center's secure feed as Do-hyun's vital signs, monitored by the base's medical systems, showed him entering normal sleep patterns. "Impossible," Rill chimed, his crystal body flickering with confusion. "The terror waves are at maximum strength. Even with dampeners, no one should be able to rest." The swarm's attack grew stronger. The very walls of the base trembled. In the bunkers, aliens of all species huddled together, their various biology, all showing signs of extreme stress. But the camera feed from the barracks showed Do-hyun sleeping peacefully, the book now resting on his chest, rising and falling with his steady breathing. 3 hours into the attack, something unprecedented happened. The swarm's ships began to pull back. They're retreating. Rill watched the tactical display in shock. But why? Their terror weapons were working on everyone except the human. In the barracks, Do-hyun was still sleeping soundly. He had turned over once during the entire attack, muttering something about needing 5 more minutes. His calm, vital signs showed on every medical monitor in the base, a steady reminder that somehow a Deathworlder found peace in conditions that terrorized every other known species. When the all-clear finally sounded, Tech was the first to leave the bunker. He found Do-hyun still in his hammock, just waking up and stretching. "How?" Tech's translator barely managed to convey his mix of fear and awe. "How did you sleep through that?" Do-hyun sat up, looking refreshed. "You know what's really scary? Missing a deadline at work back on Earth. Now that's terror." He checked his watch. "Oh good, plenty of time for breakfast. Want to join me, Tech? I still owe you that chocolate ration." As they walked to the mess hall, word of the humans' peaceful sleep spread through the base. Aliens emerged from their bunkers, staring at Do-hyun with new eyes. They had all read about Deathworlders, about how dangerous and frightening humans could be. But none of their studies had prepared them for this, a human who found such peace in chaos that even the swarm's most powerful weapons couldn't disturb his rest. First Speaker Rill made a note in the base's log. "Perhaps the most terrifying thing about humans is not their strength or their technology, but their ability to find calm in conditions that would break any other species. The base's common room was quiet except for the sound of Do-hyun's spoon hitting his bowl of rice. He sat alone at one of the metal tables, eating his Earth-made breakfast while reading reports on his tablet. The aliens usually avoided the common room during mealtimes. The sight of humans eating made many of them uncomfortable. "Mind if I join you?" a voice asked in Korean. Do-hyun looked up to see another human, a woman in a civilian researcher's uniform. Her name tag read Jae-yun, and she carried a tray with her own Earth breakfast. "Please," he said, gesturing to the empty chair. "It's nice to hear Korean again. I'm Do-hyun." "I know." Jae-yun smiled as she sat down. "The whole base is talking about the human who sleeps through swarm attacks. I'm here studying alien stress responses. You've made my research very interesting this week." Before Do-hyun could reply, a group of alien soldiers entered the common room. They stood nervously by the door, their various appendages twitching with uncertainty. Do-hyun recognized Tech among them. "Come in," Jae-yun called out, waving them over. "We don't bite." "Well, not during breakfast anyway." The aliens moved closer, though they still kept some distance. Tech seemed braver than the others, stepping forward with a small device in his hands. "Lieutenant," Tech's translator hummed, "we were wondering if we could study you while you eat. The base commander thinks understanding human behavior might help us fight better." Do-hyun shrugged. "Sure. Pull up a chair, but I'd warn you, humans aren't that interesting." The aliens gathered around, their scientific devices whirring and blinking. Jae-yun pulled out her own tablet, taking notes as the cultural exchange unfolded. "How can you be so calm?" asked a floating gas cloud alien named Mist. "Even now, we can hear distant explosions, but your heart rate hasn't changed at all." Do-hyun chewed his rice thoughtfully. "On Earth, we learn to live with danger from an early age. Earthquakes, storms, wild animals. They're just part of life. You either learn to stay calm, or you spend your whole life scared." "But surely you feel fear?" asked another alien, this one a crystalline being like Rill. "Of course we do," Jae-yun jumped in. "But humans process fear differently. We've evolved to use it as a tool rather than let it control us. It's why we can sleep through danger or eat during battles." The aliens watched in fascination as Do-hyun finished his meal. Their devices recorded everything: his steady heartbeat, his relaxed breathing, the casual way he checked his messages while explosions echoed outside. "Would you like to try something from Earth?" Jae-yun asked the group, pulling a small package from her bag. "It's called chocolate. Very safe for most species." The aliens looked terrified at first, but curiosity won out. One by one, they accepted small pieces of the brown candy. Their reactions ranged from surprise to delight. "It's good," Tech said, his antennae wiggling with pleasure. "But how do you discover such things? On our worlds, trying unknown substances is too dangerous." "Trial and error," Do-hyun said simply. "Lots of error, actually. Earth's history is full of humans trying things they probably shouldn't have. But we learned from each mistake." As they talked, more aliens drifted into the common room. Soon, the once empty space was filled with different species, all sharing stories about their worlds and cultures. Even when another distant explosion shook the base, nobody ran away. They just talked a bit louder. Jae-yun kept taking notes, but she was smiling. "See," she whispered to Do-hyun. "Sometimes the best way to help others overcome fear is just to show them it's possible." Do-hyun nodded, watching as Tech bravely tried another piece of chocolate. The aliens were still nervous, still jumped at loud noises, but they were trying. Maybe that was the real strength of humanity. Not that they weren't afraid, but that they could teach others to face their fears. "Next time the swarm attacks," Tech said suddenly, Could we try staying out of the bunker? Just for a little while." The room fell silent. Do-hyun looked at the mantis alien with new respect. "Of course, We can start with 5 minutes. Baby steps, as we say on Earth. Baby steps, the aliens repeated, testing the strange human phrase. Outside, the war continued, but in this room, something new was growing. Understanding between species, born from the simple act of sharing a meal with a Deathworlder who refused to be afraid. Jai Yun sat in the base's research lab, surrounded by screens filled with data. She had been studying the readings from the last 3 swarm attacks, comparing how different species reacted to the terror weapons. Something about the patterns kept bothering her, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. Do-hyun walked in, carrying 2 cups of Earth coffee. "You missed lunch," he said, placing 1 cup next to her keyboard. "Tech was asking about you." "Look at this," Jai-yun said, pointing to one of the screens. "These are brainwave patterns from different species during the attacks. See how they all spike in similar ways, all except humans." Do-hyun leaned closer, sipping his coffee. The screen showed colorful lines that jumped and twisted. Each line represented a different alien species, and they all showed the same sharp spikes during swarm attacks. But the human line stayed almost flat. "Maybe we're just braver," Do-hyun suggested with a small smile. Jai-yun shook her head. "No, it's more than that. I think I know why the swarm's weapons don't work on us." She pulled up more data on the screens. Every species in the galaxy evolved on worlds safer than Earth. Their brains developed simple fear responses because they didn't need complex ones. But Earth tried to kill us every day, Do-hyun finished, understanding starting to show on his face. "Exactly." Jai-yun stood up excitedly. "Earthquakes, volcanoes, predators, storms. Humans had to develop better ways to handle fear. We didn't just get stronger bodies from being Deathworlders. We got stronger minds too." She typed quickly, bringing up new images. The swarm's terror weapons work by triggering basic fear responses. It's like pressing a simple button in alien brains. But human brains don't have that button anymore. We replaced it with something more complex. "So when I sleep through attacks," Do-hyun started. "It's not because you're brave or calm," Jai-yun said. "Well, you are, but that's not the main reason. Your brain literally can't process fear the same way other species do. The swarm's weapons are trying to press a button that doesn't exist anymore." A soft chime announced someone at the door. It was Tech, looking nervous as usual but determined. "The commander asked me to check on your research," he said through his translator. "Have you found anything useful?" Jai-yun smiled warmly at the mantis alien. "Actually, yes. Tech, how would you like to learn how to think more like a human?" Tech's antennae twitched with interest. "Is that possible?" "Maybe not completely," Jai-yun admitted. "But humans didn't always sleep through danger like Do-hyun does. We learned how to process fear differently over thousands of years. Maybe we can teach you some of those ways." Do-hyun watched as Jai-yun explained her discovery to Tech, using simple drawings to show how different brains handled fear. The mantis alien's usual nervous movements slowed as he began to understand. "So when the lieutenant sleeps during attacks," Tech said slowly, "it's like trying to open a door that isn't there anymore." Jai-yun explained. "The swarm is using the wrong key for human brains. We evolved past their tricks." Suddenly, the base alarms started blaring again. Tech jumped, his natural instincts kicking in. But instead of running for the bunker, he stayed where he was, watching Do-hyun's calm reaction. "Want to try something?" Do-hyun asked Tech. "Stay here with us, just for a few minutes. Watch how we handle it." The mantis alien's legs shook, but he nodded. "Yes. Teach me to be unavailable to fear, like you." Jai-yun smiled and pulled up more data on her screens. "That's the amazing thing about brains. They can learn new tricks. The swarm thinks fear is simple, but we know better. We learned that on Earth, and now we can share that knowledge." As the first waves of the terror weapons hit the base, Tech stood with his human friends, watching their calm reactions. trying to understand how a species from the most dangerous world in known space had turned that danger into their greatest strength. Maybe, Jai-Yun said softly, being a Deathworlder isn't about being the strongest or the scariest. Maybe it's about learning to face fear so many times that it loses its power over you. Do-hyun nodded, already looking sleepy despite the attack. Want to see how I set up my hammock tech? First lesson in human-style relaxation. The base's main screen showed hundreds of red dots moving toward them. Each dot was a swarm ship, and there were more coming every minute. First, Speaker Rill's crystal body flashed with rapid colors of fear and worry. This is the largest attack we've ever seen, Rill announced to the command center. His translator couldn't hide the shake in his voice. All personnel, head to the deep bunkers immediately. In the corner of the room, Do-hyun sat at a small desk, calmly opening his lunchbox. The smell of earth food filled the air as he pulled out rice and dried seaweed. Jai-Yun stood next to him, reviewing data on her tablet. Lieutenant, Rill's voice crackled. This is not the time for eating. Do-hyun looked up from his lunch. Actually, sir, this is the perfect time. We think better when we're not hungry. Would you like some? It's my mother's recipe. The room fell silent except for the alarms. Alien technicians stared at the human eating lunch during their biggest crisis. Some looked scared, others confused, and a few seemed curious. Sir, Jai-Yun stepped forward. Do-hyun has a point. Panic makes us make mistakes. The swarm knows this. It's why they send terror weapons first. As if to prove her point, the first wave of sonic attacks hit the base. The walls vibrated with the special frequencies designed to cause fear. Most aliens dropped to the floor or froze in place. But Do-hyun just kept eating, and Jai-Yun continued checking her data. The base shields are failing. A technician called out, their tentacles shaking. We have maybe 20 minutes left. Do-hyun finished his rice and pulled out a small notebook. 20 minutes is plenty of time. Jai-Yun, show them what you found about the shield frequencies. Jai-Yun connected her tablet to the main screen. Look here, she said, pointing to a chart. The swarm's weapons work by matching fear frequencies in alien brains. But they can't match human patterns because ours are too complex. That's very interesting, Rill chimed sarcastically, his crystal body flashing red. But how does this help us survive? Because, Do-hyun said, writing in his notebook, if we can't be simple anymore, maybe we can teach your shields the same trick. More swarm ships appeared on the screen. The base's outer defenses started to fall. But in the command center, 2 humans stayed perfectly calm. Do-hyun wrote plans in his notebook while Jai-Yun explained her research to the alien technicians. Tech burst into the room, his antennae whipping around wildly. The other bases have fallen. We're the last ones standing. Good, Do-hyun said, surprising everyone. That means we're the only ones they're attacking. It gives us time to work. Time to work. Rill's translator crackled with disbelief. We're about to die. No, Jai-Yun said firmly. We're about to win. But first, everyone needs to calm down and think clearly. Who wants to learn some human breathing exercises? As the swarm ships got closer, something strange happened in the command center. Aliens who had been shaking in fear started copying Do-hyun's calm breathing. Jai-Yun taught them simple earth meditation techniques. Some even tried bits of Do-hyun's lunch. Fear is like a storm, Do-hyun explained, drawing diagrams in his notebook. You can run from it, or you can learn to walk in the rain. Rill watched in amazement as his terrified crew slowly began to focus. Their hands shook less. Their minds cleared. Even as the swarm's terror weapons got stronger, the aliens found themselves able to think better. Lieutenant, Rill said, his crystal body settling into a steady blue glow. What's your plan? Do-hyun held up his notebook, showing a simple but clever defense strategy. The swarm thinks they know how to scare us, he said with a small smile. Let's show them what happens when you try to frighten someone from Earth. Outside, The swarm ships moved in for what they thought would be an easy victory. They didn't know that inside the base, two humans were teaching a group of aliens something that no terror weapon could beat: the Deathworlder's gift of finding peace in chaos. Jai-Yun stood in front of the base's main screen, pointing to a simple diagram she had drawn. Around her, aliens of different species watched with mixed fear and hope in their eyes, while Du-Hyun sat nearby, adding notes to his notebook. Earth's magnetic field protected us for millions of years, Jai-Yun explained, drawing more lines on the screen. It didn't just shield us from space radiation, it helped shape how our brains work. But what does this have to do with the swarm? Asked Tech, his antennae twitching less than usual. He had been practicing Do-Hyun's breathing exercises. Do-Hyun looked up from his notebook. Earth's field is complex and always changing. Our brains grew up with this pattern. That's part of why we handle fear differently. Jai-Yun nodded and changed the display. Now it showed the base's shield system, a simple bubble of energy that blocked physical attacks but did nothing against the swarm's terror weapons. "We can't make your brains work like ours," she said. "That would take millions of years. But we can make your shields work like Earth's magnetic field. Complex, always changing, never simple." First speaker Rill moved closer, his crystal body glowing with interest. "How would this help us fight the swarm?" "Their terror weapons work by being simple and direct," Do-Hyun explained, holding up his notebook. "Like throwing a rock at a window. But what if the window kept changing? What if it was never in the same place twice?" The aliens gathered around Do-Hyun's notebook. He had drawn a new shield design, based on Earth's magnetic patterns. It looked messy and chaotic compared to their clean, simple shields. "This is crazy," one of the alien engineers said. "Shields need to be stable and predictable." "Like your fear responses?" Jai-Yun asked gently. The engineer's tentacles drooped as they understood her point. Do-Hyun stood up and walked to a small control panel. "Earth taught us that sometimes chaos protects better than order. Our bodies are messy. Our brains are complicated. That's why we survive." He typed some numbers into the panel, and a small test shield appeared in the corner of the room. It flickered and swirled like Earth's aurora lights. "Beautiful," Tech whispered, reaching out to touch it. When his claw passed through the shield, he felt something strange. The constant fear that the swarm caused seemed to fade a little. "The pattern disrupts their terror frequencies," Jai-Yun explained excitedly, "just like how human brains disrupt them naturally. We can't block the weapons completely, but we can make them much weaker." Rill's crystal body flashed with decision colors. "How long to modify the main shields?" 4 hours, Do-Hyun said, checking his notebook. "Maybe 3 if everyone helps." "The swarm will attack again before then," Tech pointed out, his fear starting to return. Do-Hyun smiled and pulled something from his bag. It was a small music player with Earth songs. "Then we work fast, and we stay calm. Who wants to learn about Earth music while we work?" The next 3 hours were strange ones in the base's history. As alien engineers rewired shield generators, Do-Hyun played everything from classical music to K-pop. Jai-Yun taught them simple Earth games to keep their minds busy. When fear crept in, they all practiced breathing together. "I don't understand," Rill said, watching his crew work better than they ever had during a crisis. "How can you make fear feel so unimportant?" "We don't make it unimportant," Jai-Yun explained, helping an engineer adjust a shield panel. "We accept it, learn from it, but don't let it control us. That's the real secret of Earth." As they worked, the patterns in the test shield grew stronger. Each time an alien passed through it, they felt a little braver, a little calmer. They were learning what every human knew from birth, that fear was not their enemy, but a teacher. "Look," Do-Hyun said, pointing to his notebook's final page. "The shield pattern is almost exactly like Earth's field during a normal day on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy." The aliens looked at the pattern with new understanding. They had always thought of Earth as a nightmare world, but now they saw it differently. Perhaps the very things that made Earth terrible had also made it wonderful. A distant explosion reminded them that the swarm was still coming. But for the first time, the sound didn't cause panic. Instead, the aliens smiled at each other and kept working, humming Earth songs under their breath. The base shook as another swarm attack began. In the main shield control room, Jai-Yun watched rows of numbers on her screen, while alien technicians rushed around her. The new shield design was almost ready, but they needed more time. "How can you be so calm?" asked a blue-skinned engineer, their hands shaking as they worked on the control panel. "Practice," Jai-Yun said, typing quickly. "Also, I had a scarier job once, teaching middle school students back on Earth." Across the room, Do-hyun sat in a comfortable chair he had brought from his quarters. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was steady. He wasn't sleeping exactly, but resting between helping with the shield modifications. "The lieutenant is sleeping now." Tech's voice rose with panic as another explosion rocked the base. "Power nap," Do-hyun said without opening his eyes. "Humans think better when we're rested. Wake me in 20 minutes, or if something explodes too close to us." The alien stared at him, then at Jai-Yun. She smiled and kept working. "Don't worry. He'll wake up if we really need him. Humans are good at that too." The next hour was filled with strange contrasts. While the swarm's terror weapons made the air itself vibrate with fear, Do-hyun took short naps between helping adjust shield controls. As alien crews ran emergency repairs, Jai-Yun taught them Earth songs to keep their minds busy. "Shields at 40% of new configuration," reported one of the technicians. Their voice shook less than before, partly because they were singing a simple Earth song about a yellow submarine. First Speaker Rill entered the control room, his crystal body glowing with worry colors. "The swarm is gathering for another big attack. Will we be ready?" Do-hyun opened his eyes and stretched. "Just in time for the fun part," he said, standing up. "Jai-Yun, show them what happens when we activate the Earth pattern." Jai-Yun pressed several buttons on her control panel. The base's main shields, which usually glowed with a steady blue light, began to shift and swirl with different colors. It looked like the northern lights that humans often saw on Earth. "Beautiful," Tech whispered, his antennae moving in wonder rather than fear. "Watch this," Jai-Yun said. She activated the test sequence they had prepared. The swarm's terror weapons hit the new shields. But instead of the usual overwhelming fear, the aliens in the room felt something different. The fear was still there, but it felt distant, manageable. "It's working," the blue-skinned engineer shouted. "The fear, it's not gone, but it's like rain on a window," Do-hyun finished, smiling. "You can hear it, but it can't get to you." The aliens watched in amazement as their monitoring systems showed the swarm weapons trying to find a way through the shifting shields. But the Earth pattern defenses kept changing, never staying still enough to be broken. 50% complete, Jai-Yun announced. "We just need to hold on a little longer." Another blast rocked the base, stronger than before. Warning lights flashed on several panels. The aliens started to panic, but then they saw Do-hyun settling back into his chair for another quick nap. "How?" Rill asked, his crystal body flickering between fear and confusion. "How can you sleep at a time like this?" "Because," Do-hyun said, yawning, "being afraid won't make the shields work faster. Being rested will help me think better when you need me." Simple Earth logic. The aliens looked at each other, then at their own workstations. Slowly, they began to understand. One by one, they sat down, took deep breaths, and focused on their tasks instead of their fear. 60%, Jai-Yun called out. She looked around the room with pride. The aliens weren't just copying human behavior anymore. They were beginning to understand it. "Wake me when we hit 80%, Do-hyun said, closing his eyes again. "Or if something really interesting happens." As the swarm continued their attack, the room filled with a strange peace. Aliens worked steadily at their stations, some humming Earth songs, others practicing the breathing exercises they had learned. And in his chair, a human from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy showed them the ultimate victory over fear: the ability to find rest in the middle of a storm. The main screen of the base showed the largest swarm fleet anyone had ever seen. Hundreds of ships filled the purple sky, their weapons charging for what they thought would be their final attack. But something was different this time. In the command center, aliens stood at their posts without shaking. Some even looked calm, following the breathing patterns Du-Hyun had taught them. The new shield swirled around the base like Earth's northern lights, changing and shifting in ways the swarm had never seen before. "They're hesitating," Jae-yun said, pointing to the screen. "Look, they don't know what to make of our new shields." Do-Hyun nodded, sipping his coffee. Swarm tactics always depend on fear. When fear doesn't work, they don't have a backup plan. First Speaker Rill's crystal body glowed with steady blue light as he watched the enemy ships. A month ago, this sight would have frozen him with terror. Now he felt something new: curiosity instead of fear. "All stations," Rill called out, his translator voice strong and clear. "Remember your human training. Breathe. Focus. Fear is just a teacher, not our master." The first wave of swarm weapons hit the shields. The aliens waited for the usual wave of terror, but it felt different now. The fear was there, but it felt far away, like hearing thunder from inside a safe house. "Shield holding at 90%, Tech reported from his station. His antennae twitched slightly, but he kept working. "The Earth pattern is disrupting their terror frequencies just like we planned." Jae-yun watched her readings with excitement. The swarm ships are using more power now, trying to break through. But they can't match our shield pattern. It's too complex, too much like Earth's magnetic field. The swarm ships moved closer, firing everything they had. The base shook, but nobody ran for the bunkers. Instead, the alien crew worked calmly at their stations, some even humming Earth songs to stay focused. "They're getting frustrated," Du-Hyun said, watching the enemy ships change formation. "They've never failed to cause panic before. They don't know what to do when their fear weapons don't work." Suddenly, one of the swarm ships exploded, then another and another. Their weapons were overloading as they tried to break through the constantly changing shields. "They're destroying themselves," Rill said in wonder. "Their own fear weapons are backfiring." The remaining swarm ships started to pull back, but not in their usual organized way. They seemed confused, almost scared themselves. For the first time in history, a swarm attack had completely failed. "Send a message to other bases," Du-Hyun suggested. "Tell them what we learned about fear from Earth. Tell them that being scared is normal, but letting fear control you is a choice." Jae-yun added, "And tell them about the shields. Every base can copy this design. The swarm's terror weapons will never work the same way again." The command center erupted in cheers, quiet ones, because they had learned from humans that celebration didn't need to be loud to be meaningful. Tech walked over to Du-Hyun and Jae-yun, his steps steady and confident. "We won because you taught us to think like Deathworlders," Tech said. "Not to be fearless, but to be strong even when we're afraid." First Speaker Rill approached the humans, his crystal body shining with new colors they had never seen before, colors of pride and hope. "We always thought Earth was a nightmare world that created monsters. Now we understand it created teachers instead." Do-Hyun smiled and finished his coffee. "Earth taught us that the most dangerous things can make us stronger if we learn from them instead of running away." Speaking of learning, he looked at his watch. "Anyone want to try sleeping through the next attack? I can show you how to set up a hammock." The aliens laughed, a sound that would have been impossible during a battle just days ago. Outside, the swarm ships disappeared into space, leaving behind a base full of changed beings. They weren't humans, and they never would be. But they had learned perhaps the most important lesson Earth had to teach, that peace could be found even in the middle of chaos, if you were brave enough to look for it. So, Jai-Yun asked, looking around at their alien friends, who's ready for their first Earth-style nap during battle? 3 months after the Great Swarm defeat, the base's main hall was filled with aliens from across the galaxy. They had come to see the first graduation ceremony of what they now call the Earth Method Training Program. Do-hyun sat in his favorite chair at the back of the room, peacefully sleeping through the excited chatter. Jai-Yun stood near the front, recording everything on her tablet. Her research on fear responses had become famous throughout the Galactic Coalition. But more importantly, it had helped change how aliens viewed humans and Earth itself. Should we wake him for the ceremony? Tech asked, looking at Do-hyun's sleeping form. The mantis alien no longer twitched when he walked, and his antennae stayed calm even during alerts. Let him rest, Jai-Yun smiled. He was up late helping the new students practice their relaxation techniques. First speaker Rill stepped onto the stage, his crystal body glowing with proud colors. The room fell quiet, not from fear, but from respect. 3 months ago, Rill began, we thought humans were dangerous because they came from a deadly world. We were right about one thing. Earth is dangerous. But we were wrong about everything else. The crowd nodded. Many of them had been there during the Great Battle. They remembered how 2 humans had taught them to face their fears. Today, we graduate the first class of officers trained in Earth Method stress response. Rill continued, they can sleep during battles. They can think clearly during crisis. They have learned what humans knew all along, that fear is not our enemy, but our teacher. In the back of the room, Do-hyun opened one eye and smiled. He watched as each graduate came forward to receive their certificate. Every one of them wore a small Earth symbol, a blue and green circle that reminded them of the planet that had taught them courage. Look at that, Jai-Yun whispered to Tech. The floatings aren't even rippling when they're nervous anymore. She pointed to a group of gas-based aliens who used to shake like leaves in the wind when they were scared. Tech nodded proudly. And the crystal folk have learned to maintain steady colors even during alerts. He gestured to several crystalline beings like Rill, who now showed calm, controlled glows. After the ceremony, aliens gathered around Do-hyun and Jai-Yun to share stories. One told how they had slept through their first battle alert. Another spoke about teaching their children earth-breathing exercises. A third demonstrated how they had modified their home's shields to use the Earth pattern. The swarm has retreated from 3 more sectors, Rill announced, joining the group. Their terror weapons don't work anymore. Not since every base installed Earth pattern shields. Not since we learned to think differently about fear. Do-hyun stretched and finally stood up from his chair. You didn't just learn to copy humans, he said. You found your own way to be strong. Each species did it differently, but you all learned the same lesson. That peace can exist even in chaos, Jai-Yun added. That's the real gift Earth gave us. Not fearlessness, but understanding. As if to prove their point, the base alarms suddenly began to sound. But nobody ran. Nobody panicked. The graduates calmly walked to their posts, some even yawning like they had seen Do-hyun do so many times. Would you look at that? Do-hyun said proudly. They don't even need us anymore. They never did, Jai-Yun corrected him. They just needed to see that it was possible. Earth taught us that, and now we taught them. First speaker Rill's crystal body glowed with all the colors of Earth's aurora, the same colors that now protected bases across the galaxy. We used to call humans Deathworlders, like it was something bad, he said. Now we understand. Living with death taught you how to truly live. As the graduates took their positions, many of them setting up comfortable spots to rest between their duties, Do-hyun and Jai-Yun watched with pride. The scary Deathworlders from Earth hadn't conquered the galaxy with weapons or terror. Instead, they had done something much more powerful. They had taught the galaxy how to find peace in chaos, strength in fear, and rest even in the middle of a storm. So, Du Hyun said, setting up his familiar hammock while the alarms blared. Who wants to join me for a nap during the excitement? To no one's surprise, many of the graduates took him up on the offer.